1 million UFO sightings are reported each year. Most can be debunked, but 5% remain unexplained. These are the close encounters. Veteran farmhand George Blackwell is in charge of a 600-acre cattle station in the dry Australian outback.
It's in the Rosedale case I talked personally to George Blackwell, the caretaker, salt-of-the-earth type of guy. George had been doing this caretaker role for quite a number of years and was a trusted employee, a very substantial character.
George, bunch of cattle rustlers been poking around again.
George Blackwell's responsibilities on the ranch or the property were making sure that the cattle and livestock were secured.
I'll be up if there's trouble. Right.
Cattle rustling is something that seems quite foreign to the modern era, but it's a problem that's still alive today.
In Australia, high-tech rustlers use anything from tractor-trailers to cargo planes to steal cattle.
There hadn't been an occurrence on that property, but the caretaker was kind of aware and sensitive to disturbances, making sure that he was responsive to anything that might have gone down, on a particular evening. Suddenly, George Blackwell was disturbed by the fairly substantial breakout of the livestock.
Blackwell notices the prized mare is extremely spooked.
Animals seem more sensitive to their environments than humans, so it's not unusual that animals would sense high-pitched noises or electromagnetic effects.
Then, George sees something in the distance.
He could straight away determine that here was this unusual dish-shaped object that was travelling along at extremely low altitude. He at first sort of thought, well, it must be some sort of aircraft. George sees that the object is heading down to this larger paddock. Bearing in mind that there had been some local instances of livestock theft, he obviously was obliged to investigate it. You could see that the object was traversing the property, and he realised that if the object continued in its trajectory, it would collide with a 10,000-gallon water tank. The object that he could see was clearly not a conventional aircraft of any type that he could recognise. What George confronted was a really strange object.
Australian ranch hand George Blackwell races to protect his herd from what he thinks is a high-tech cattle rustling operation.
The level of disturbance in the livestock was pretty extreme, and he knows that by just getting onto his motorcycle and following the path of this object, he'd be able to get a clear line of sight as to what was going on in the actual property.
As Blackwell rounds the corner, he makes a startling discovery.
He's met with one cow just obviously in a highly distressed state, frothing from the mouth. He just wanted to get out.
Blackwell comes face to face with the object he's been tracking.
The whole cattle rustling side of the equation had gone out the window. He knew he wasn't dealing with anything related to a cattle rustling operation.
Blackwell moves in for a closer look.
The object had moved down and actually appeared to come to rest on top of the water tank. The things that were immediately apparent to George was that this was no ordinary aircraft or helicopter. There was no wings, no propellers, no nothing. George, I think, was having trouble trying to figure out what the hell was going on. He was dealing with an object that appeared to be roughly 25 feet in diameter, approximately 12 to 15 feet in height. And on the bottom of this was a black band or a spherical band underneath. It was drawing up water through some sort of tube-like extension from the bottom of the object. There's all sorts of speculation about whether or not this has to do with some sort of fuel cycle or something like that. Given what transpired in this encounter, there was a major connection with water.
George Blackwell begins to feel uneasy.
He's starting to become extremely unsettled, really quite agitated. He had problems with the watch. His watch had stopped, so there was some sort of almost seemingly electromagnetic kind of disturbance going on there that affected his watch.
The object suddenly emits a high-pitched squeal.
The fact that the object was creating such a noise and a trembling certainly would make you physically tremble as well.
And then Blackwell loses control of his body.
He felt that he had turned into a plate of jelly. He literally almost lost all kind of stability in his muscle system.
There was certainly a factor going on, not just psychologically, but physiologically, where the object was physically affecting him.
The object suddenly rose up to about 20 to 30 feet. At this point, there seemed to be the sudden blast of hot air.
As it pulls away from the water tower, the object releases debris.
That debris consisted of cow patties, capeweed, which is kind of a local grass, and stones. It continued off into the distance and kept going until it was out of sight. And here's poor George, totally stunned, standing at the side in the dark with this extraordinary event that had just played out.
The next morning, Blackwell would check his 40,000-liter water tank and find it was completely empty. Investigators would learn the night before the incident, a neighbor saw a bright, colorful object in the sky around the same time as George Blackwell's sighting. Soon after the incident, Blackwell complains of vomiting, diarrhea, and severe headaches, symptoms suggesting exposure to radiation. But soil samples gathered at the site reveal no evidence of unnatural contamination.
There are very few cases. Je vous en prie, madame. where a witness has come within 1 meter of an object.
Descendez dans mon jardin ici.
This makes this one of the most unusual cases in UFO history.
Henri Laurent returns home after running a few morning errands.
Mr. Henri was a 30-year-old man, married with a good job as a biochemist in a university laboratory.
Henri's home was in a small suburban area of Nancy. It was basically in an area where you have multiple homes on the street.
Nancy is a middle-sized city in the east of France, about 150,000 inhabitants. It's a rather peaceful place.
As an avid gardener, Henri is always eager to get back to his flowers.
And suddenly he noticed what he thought was a plane crossing the sky. It was rather shiny, and it had a very good view of it.
While the plane sounds rather unusual, Henri turns his attention back to his garden and his prized amaranths. But he's quickly drawn back to the skies.
It became more and more evident that the object was coming towards him. He became concerned as to whether or not this was some type of aircraft that was possibly no longer under control.
As it approached and drew nearer, he realized it was not an airplane at all.
His first thought, of course, is concern for himself and for his property.
The object came to a standstill about 1 meter above the ground.
I'm not aware that Henri had any feeling that this object was targeting him, but he did have to take that into account as a possibility.
It was a completely strange, incredible sight.
While working in his garden, biochemist Henri Laurent watches a mysterious craft drop from the skies right into his yard. After a few minutes, Henri's scientific mind takes over.
His emotional state was basically one of curiosity and trying to understand exactly what it was that he was witnessing.
This object emitted no heat. It was not moving at all.
Henri began to observe this object from several different vantage points.
There was a curved part which looked like beryllium. Beryllium is a metal used in nuclear plants. It's a rather special metal.
Henri is tempted to touch the craft, but holds back. He fears it could be electrified.
It was a completely strange, incredible sight.
One of the first thoughts for any research scientist was, let me document what I'm looking at.
He went back to his house to grab his camera and take a picture.
At the first attempt to take a picture, his camera jammed. In many UFO cases, cameras and video equipment sometimes do not operate properly. And usually it's thought it's due to some type of EM pulse or some type of electromagnetic field. But in the case of Henri, we know that his camera was a standard camera which he had been having problems with. So we believe this was a failure actually due to the mechanics of his camera itself.
Suddenly, the craft shot up very fast.
And he described this as if you had a vacuum and you just sucked the object up into the sky. It suddenly zips off, and all he can see left is a bright light far away in the sky.
So he was completely flabbergasted. He was just stunned by what he saw.
All the propulsion systems we're familiar with would have left a trace or some type of marking on the ground if it hadn't blasted the soil away.
But his precious garden has been strangely affected.
He notices that some of his amaranth plants have appeared to begin to wilt.
Those plants closest to the craft looked like they had been heated and dried, which looked like maybe electromagnetic effect.
And so now he realizes there is some trace indication of this craft in his garden.
Hello? Oui, police?
He immediately calls the gendarmerie and reported what had just occurred. There was a lot at stake for Henri to make such a report.
Je vous en prie, madame. Je suis sûr, je vous en prie. Heureux de la montagne en deux. Merci, merci beaucoup, au revoir.
The gendarmerie in France take all UFO reports seriously. You can be arrested by the gendarmerie for a false report.
The gendarme took samples of the plants.
Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé après ça, Monsieur Laurent?
Bon, je vous dis, je travaillais ici, dans mon jardin, comme d'habitude, et tout à coup, ces trucs descendaient dans mon jardin, ici.
They also took samples of the grass at various distances from the position of the craft.
Mais voyez les fleurs, ils sont tous brûlés, tous les fleurs sont brûlées là. Il a disparu, il a parti, il a tiré vers le ciel, juste vers là, vers le ciel. Il a tiré très rapidement et a disparu. Il a disparu, juste comme ça, tout à coup. Tout s'est passé tout à coup.
There are very few cases where a witness has come within 1 meter of an object such as this. So this makes this one of the most unusual cases in UFO history.
The plant and grass samples become the focus of the investigation. Following strict policy, the gendarmes turn the case over to Geipan, the French national body responsible for all unexplained aerospace phenomena. Analysis of the collected samples reveals that the plants were only damaged above ground, while their roots were left totally unaffected. Geipan concludes that an electrical field in excess of 200 kilovolts per meter would have been needed to cause the burning of the amaranth plants, a reading equivalent to a deadly high-voltage power line. Yet despite standing only a few feet from those damaged amaranths, Henri Laurent suffers no medical ill effects. Geipan's final report is unable to fully explain what took place in his yard that day.